So today we have this Squier Telecaster Custom, and what we're going to be doing is a couple upgrades. We're going to put on some Fender saddles, bent steel, and we're going to install these ratio tuners. These are multi-gear tuners. They're really awesome, and they come with plates to be installed on all different types of guitars. So you buy one and it'll fit just about any type of tuning key that you have. And so the first thing I'm going to do is detune it and get off the strings, and then we're going to swap out the saddles. We're also going to change the tuners, and when we're done with that, we're going to do a setup on this with a lower gauge strings. It has pretty thick strings on it. It's a 12. It's a guitar setup before. And so the first thing I'm going to do, get these strings off. We're going to go down to 11 gauge and see if we could do that without needing to fill in the nut slots. So one thing to always remember is to recycle all your strings. Cut them off right here. Just stick them all through. What you can do with your recycled string is, once you have 2 pounds of them, you can send them into Diodario and get players points. For 2 pounds, I think you get something like 800 players points. And you could get free strings with that. You could get t-shirts and stuff. Other type of gear, they have a lot of stuff. And when you change as many strings as I do, and I'm talking about almost every day, it adds up. Those points really add up. So 2,000 points, which is about 20 packs of strings. They give you 100 points for every pack. So you'll end up with a free t-shirt for every 20 packs of strings. Or you could also get another pack of strings, usually for around the same price. And sometimes you have to get creative to remove these strings. Removing strings that have been tied on is an art. Doing it without getting poked by one of them is definitely an art, but sometimes you have some of them stuck. Sometimes you need a needle nose plier to yank these things out. You know, it depends on the method you use. Some methods, when you're actually putting on the strings, changing the strings, will leave you with, you know, a nice clean way to just pull the string out. The way I do it requires a little bit more work. Now let me see if this is the right side. Yep. So loosen them up with the drill just to make my life a little easier. And then I'll take them off by hand. And the right way to do this is to put this back just so that when you store these tuners, they're in one piece. And you don't lose any washers or anything like that, because that's a pain in the ass to try to replace, and sometimes they fall on the floor and then you can't find them, and they're easy to lose. And this is good. These are the 2-pin style tuners, so the tuners we have are going to slide right in. Because like I said, they come with, you know, plates that will basically let you install those tuners on any type of guitar that you can think of, even if they have, you know, those really cheap tuners that are screwed in, that just have, you know, 1 pin on them instead of 2, and they need to use a screw to keep it stabilized. Otherwise the tuner will move around. Does it matter if, you know, you put these back in the right order? I usually like to store them in a way that I will remember which one is which. That's not so easy to do though if you use like a plastic bag or something. The right way to do it is with some masking tape, and you tape them up and mark it. This way you know exactly where they belong. And now I'm just going to take off these saddles, which they're garbage for all intensive purposes. I would never recommend keeping these saddles on your guitar, just because what ends up happening with them is, because of the cheap pop metal that's used, after a few setups, sometimes after a bunch of setups, what will happen is this thread will widen out, and then the screw won't fit in, and you'll have trouble with your intonation. And so what I like to do is put the spring right back on the screw and put it right back in and store it just like that, the same way we did with our tuners. Because I just don't like losing shit. And when these little springs fall out and stuff, it's hard to find one that's an exact fit, or you have to take one out of another set. And sometimes, yeah, you get them left over, especially if you do this as often as I do. I have a whole box full of junk parts, and there's screws in there that'll fit if one of these gets lost. A bunch of these little springs also, and you could buy a set of them. It's relatively cheap, but if you're working on a guitar that you want to get back to someone that day or the next day, you can see where you would run into a problem. Okay, so this one is a little stiff, and so we may need to use our drill to get it out. It happens sometimes. It's not just a little stiff, it's pretty tough. So, I'm going to try another screwdriver first and see if a little smaller is going to fit in there. And the number 2 is big. folks, this stuff is trial and error. You know, it's a good thing we're getting rid of these. That's not going to work. And so, try a different screwdriver. Screwdriver in mind that I think is going to do the job. If I can just find it. I'm going to take off the other ones in the meantime. So that, the thread on that one is, you know, it's stuck in there. Screw itself is not, I mean, it looks like it's a little bit of a different color, so that might have been a screw someone put in there as a replacement. Exactly what happened. I worked on this guitar a couple of years ago, but not recently. This is like a really long and thin screwdriver, so it makes this easier because my hand can be all the way back here. I can turn things easier, but sometimes when you have old screws that have been adjusted a lot, they, you know, the tip of it gets worn down, and you need something with a little bit, you know, more substantial bit on it. Got one somewhere. Could try this one. I don't think this one. Oh. Let's flip it over so we can put our thumb down on it and keep it steady. See that? Yeah, so you need a better screwdriver. There you go. And this should do the trick. It's like this fucking super glue on it. I don't know why someone would use super glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this bridge, and then whatever that is in there, whether it's super glue or and take it out. And if I can't find a way to just get it out, I'm just gonna cut right through it. And you know, get this guy another one of those saddles. I have them laying around. They're cheap, and you know, people come up with creative ways to keep them from doing, you know, what I showed you earlier, what I told you about, that they move a lot because the threads don't hold up. You know, they make these guitars and sell them for 200 or 300 bucks. They have to cut corners somewhere, and this is one of the easiest places to cut corners, where nobody even realizes what's going on. One more screw that I missed. An electric screwdriver comes in handy, but sometimes, you know, you have a screwdriver in your hand and you want to do something. So I'll be back in a second. I'm going to get this off. I'm just gonna get this thing cleaned up. Paper towel. Wipe it with clean all sides. There's a ground wire. And that's just left there. You know, you use your bridge as a ground. So you have to be careful with that. That's another one of the shortcuts that's taken to get the prices on these things down. And I'm gonna polish everything up after I'm done. But for now, let's install our new that's just sitting there, and this is like the hole for, I want to get it out of the way of the string, because that's a hole where your high E string will come out. So as long as that's touching this plate, then we're okay, but we don't want it to get in the way and then block us and give us trouble when we're installing our strings. And you don't want your string running into that ground wire, you know. You don't want it to pull it out or something, and then your guitar doesn't work and you're gonna have a bad time. This would be a lot easier with an electric screwdriver, but I don't like to use it just because the torque can widen the holes that were drilled for these screws, and then you just have yourself another problem, and then you have to fill that and wait for it to dry and drill a new hole. Sometimes you can put a drop of super glue in it, just a tiny little drop, but you have to wait for it to completely cure before you put the screw back in there. And that only works on really small holes too. You can't put super glue, so you can line a hole with a little bit of super glue on the side, and people do that with like toothpicks for bigger holes. For smaller holes it's more difficult. Okay, so here we got 6 saddles, 6 screws, and should be 6 springs, but they're all wrapped up together. This one has a monitor that works for us. And we might need to use those bigger screws on this. I mean the bigger springs. Yeah, we are gonna need those bigger springs just because these little springs, I mean these are for a Strat really, so sometimes you have to get creative. We'll get them tighter later. What's important now is just getting them on. That's more important to us than getting them precise. We're going to need to adjust them with the intonation anyway. Sometimes you get stiffness like that and you just want to like loosen it back and then tighten it back up, because when it's stiff like that, it means the screw is not in completely straight in. That's not something we want. That will damage the saddle too. these are expensive saddles, so they're, I think, like 40 bucks in the store. So you can see this could be frustrating, especially when you're standing up. You know, this would be a lot easier if I was sitting down. I should get my stool. I haven't worked on a guitar in a couple of weeks, to be honest. So I'm a little rusty. But luckily, I still think that I'd like to know what I'm doing. And that I already know it. Yeah, I'm gonna need my stool. I'm gonna grab it. I'm just gonna move this a little bit towards me, and because this table is high, so, and I'm 6 feet tall, so I can reach over it, but and with, you know, using the springs off the old saddles, we get these to fit perfectly right where they should, and this is a big upgrade in terms of tuning stability and in terms of getting, you know, accurate intonation. Because those crappy ones, they just suck, and these aren't the best in the world, but these are the ones you find on American Strats and Telecaster, so these are what you want to be using on a cheap guitar like this if you're going to do an upgrade. I don't have the steadiest hands in the world when it comes to these small springs and screws. It's easier to do them with a screwdriver or an electric screwdriver is even better. A drill is where I'd stop short. See, the spring will just fly out like that, and that's because the spring is a little bent, but as long as you get it in place, that's not a problem. Okay. Now that those are on, we're going to need to adjust the string height, because these screws are basically all the way up, and I'm going to do that once I get the strings back on. You know, when it comes to doing these setups, there's a process. And these line up perfectly, so we're good. So I know just by seeing the way that these holes are lining up, even though this looks like a mess right now, that it's going to turn out just fine once we actually get the string on and we put the tension on them. And we set it up. You know, we need to set up that bridge completely from scratch right now. And now I'm going to move to our tuners here. Ratio tuners. Okay, ratio tuners. These are numbered. If I can get them out of here, I can show you. They have little numbers on them. I'm not sure if you could see them, but there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 is going to be the high E, and 6 is going to be the low E. And you see these tuners have, so these fit on perfectly, and you don't need any of the plates that came with them because this has those 2 dots, and they line up perfectly with the 2 dots in back of this. So this is going to be an easier install than I first thought. And what's good is we're not going to have to drill any screws or anything like that. All we need is of each of these, a bolt and a nut. And we throw this one on here. One. Put on the nut. Screw that in. That's all there is to it. And we're going to repeat that 5 more times right now. I'm going to just take out all these screws. Put these screws back because I don't need them. Thankfully. These are a drop-in right here. And number 2. And so these tuners have different gears, I think, in each one of these tuners. I didn't pick these out by any means. My friend Guy did, whose guitar this is. And well, anyway, I hope that I'm installing them the right way. From what I researched, this is the way they should be done. I'm gonna tighten them up after I have them all in. I'm gonna go for 4. Whoops. The washer. The best thing to have with working on guitars, and I find, is a magnetic tray for your parts. I'm just leaving these on the table for now right here because I trust myself. But when I get busy, what I like to do is use the magnetic tray. That way I don't lose anything, because such small parts, you know, you can lose them very easily. So the first thing I want to do right now if I can find the tool that I need. Let me just put this stuff away for now. All this stuff away before I lose any of it. Zip tie bag. That's how you lose them, is by dropping them on your table. The one bounces on the floor and you'll never see it again. Screws on. You'll find the saddle itself, but the screws and the springs are what we're really talking about. So this says to only tighten the bushings a half turn past snug to avoid damaging the guitar. So that's what we're going to do. And so I guess I'm not going to be using my handy dandy drill for this, the way I did to take them off. Having all these tools and finding the right one for the job is half the battle, folks. I've seen some guitar techs like Evan Glove, and the only reason these people haven't gone crazy yet is because they're OCD about their tools, where they put them back and things like that. And I'm not. I mean, I have a couple of bins here that I use for different things, you know. As far as I'm concerned, that's good. So, in order to know where it's half a turn past snug, I'm gonna tighten them by hand first. That's snug, and then I know to just turn them half a turn to use a wrench or. Preferably to have the right tool for this, which I do. You just need to find where I put it. And that's what makes these videos so long. Is that you can have this tool somewhere here. And if you don't have that, you can always use an adjustable wrench. Quarter turn. Open it back up. Adjust. You gotta pay close attention. That's a half. It's a quarter. It's not easy to do this way, but sometimes you don't know where your tools are and you don't have a choice. Or sometimes you're at home and you don't have all these tools. And so what do you do then, huh? Too much with this because, you know, these things break easy, so if you over tighten them, forget just, you know, like putting an imprint in the wood and cracking and stuff like that. You'll actually break the tuner. I've seen that happen. Cheap tuners, that's how they go a lot of the time, is you can just keep turning and turning and turning, and you know, the nut doesn't do anything because you have damage inside to the thread. If I give up on this, I'm going to just use the drill, and I'll just put the torque down to a level that I know is safe to tighten these with, and I know because I've done this many times. This just takes a little bit more patience to do. I keep opening and closing the wrench. See that? If you can stop it with your hand, you know you're okay, but I don't want it too loose, but we also don't want it too snug. So right around here, I think the 5 or 6 will be perfect. Okay. Maybe a drop tighter, just for fun. Just we like to take risks. And you know, when you hear that, you know they're not moving at all. So that's about as tight as we need them. Wow, these are very interesting. So I probably should have looked at this earlier to make sure that they don't even tell you. Okay, yeah, so turns out I was right. Number one is your high E. That's good. I don't have to take them all off. I can put them back on. I guess I got these for sale if anyone wants them. Although I'll probably just stick them in here and give them to this guy. Even though I got these at a pretty good price, so they go like for $120, believe it or not, out there. So our next step is to clean it up, and you know we're gonna get this thing rolling. What we're gonna do is adjust the height of these saddles, and we're going to adjust the intonation all the way at the end. That's the last thing we do. We're just going to get the strings on. We're going to tune up the guitar. Then we're going to set our neck relief once we have the tension right. We're going to set, after that, our string height, and last but not least, we're going to set our intonation. And then if we need to make any final little tiny adjustments to the string height, that's when we're going to do that. But this right now looks great. So what I'm going to do first is I know how these usually come out by eyeballing them, so I'm going to rough it out like this. It's not going to be accurate by any means, but it's going to be closer. And wow, this screw is a little rough. So on these Strats and Tellies, it's usually looks something like this. Up, you know, 3 down this way, 3 down this way. So let's clean this thing up. Let's get it restrung with the new strings. Okay, so I need to find a couple of things, including where I put my new cloths, the microfiber cloths. So I'm gonna end this video here and just consider this part 1, and then I guess part 2 will be the setup and everything else.